And welcome everybody to our Grand Finals weekend preview show. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the four teams that are competing currently for the title of Spring Champions when it comes to the PCS. I'm Opal, joined alongside Riku as always. I don't know why that would ever change at this point. This seems to be the trend when it comes to spring, but we're down to our final four teams, Riku, all fighting for the championship here for spring.
Exactly. Imagine we're only having 2 more days left to see who will be the crowned spring champions. And over 100 games, we're now finally
Oof.
here at this point. And that's the reason why I'm excited because there has been a lot of plot twists here and there. But yeah, this is going to be definitely an explosive weekend.
Yeah, you would expect three of these teams to be making it into our grand finals weekend. Of course, AHQ, MACHT, and TALON. But like you mentioned, we've had a couple of upsets as we've now found ourselves Hong Kong Attitude, our last seed coming into playoffs in this top four.
Imagine during the first round robin, they were always almost at that second to the last place during the overall standings. And now you see them side by side to these three monster teams. And, if you told me before that they would make it to the final, seeing their performance back then, I wouldn't be. I wouldn't really exactly believed you.
Yeah, and if you take a look at this bracket, it is a long road still if they wish to make it into the final. Same along with AHQ, as those two will be squaring off Saturday on May 2nd, and then the winner of that will go immediately into a best-of-5 against Talon, and then the winner of that series will go up against MACHT on our grand final Sunday. Now let's go ahead and take a look toward Hong Kong Attitude, which a team that was built from the ground up after a disappointing 2019 World showing, only retaining 3Z from the previous roster. The organization decided to field young talent to develop its next generation of stars. The regular season though was rather rough as they were only able to squeeze into playoffs after beating out Liab in a tiebreaker.
Yeah, exactly. This is a completely new roster, just as you mentioned, with a mix of, veteran at top side with 3Z and a bit of mix of ECS or LMS experience with either careers that just started last year. And you're right, they barely made it, and now they're here, actually removing a lot of the SEA-based organizations out of the
Yeah,
PCS.
they seem to be the bane when it comes to the Southeast Asia squads, taking down Berjaya as well as, again, knocking out Liab, and as well as a resurgence in a way when it came to the regular season. We can take a look toward the mid lane. It's been Jimian, though, who's been able to carry his team with his main picks of Azir, as well as the pocket picks like the Lucian coming out here during the playoffs, but there have been times when he's been caught out of position and costing his team early leads.
Yeah, I feel like Jimian has been one of that solid pillars, staying in the mid lane, especially HKA do like to play these long drawn out team fights or rather games. And with that, the Azir has been really that key pick whenever they try to fight around these objective fights, especially at Baron.
And this goes in line with how Hong Kong Attitude has been playing for most of the season. They often just wait for, those 35-minute team fights, 40-minute team fights where this Azir is able to come online, and that's why it's been such a crucial pick for Jimian when it comes into the late game.
Yeah, and I will not be surprised at all if we go to like the finals weekend and that always seemed to be like that target ban against this star player of HKA. And again, it has turned around the fights and turned the tides of battle when it comes to the team fights. And Jimian definitely is a player to watch out for when it comes to HKA.
Yeah, but like I mentioned, positioning has been his bane at times. You even see it during this clip right here where he gets caught out by Chilean, resulting in the rest of the team going down instantly.
Yep, and quite unfortunate, but for sure, it's the key Empress device that will be very scary in the later weekend.
And then we can take a look toward jungle, where it's been Hollow that has been pretty much been the main starter for HKA. The team bounced around with him as well as their other option when it came to their roster. But at the start of the season, I felt the jungle out of HKA was actually one of their weaker parts when it came to their roster. But as the season went on, especially here in the playoffs, he's been acting as the main engager for the squad.
Yeah, that's true. Considering that he's one of his favorite picks, you see the Jarvan, you see the Rek'Sai as well at certain times, but it doesn't necessarily that this equates to HKA playing the early game a little bit more aggressive, and that's the reason why we would see the occasional Sejuani that will really fit the playstyle of HKA in the later parts.
Yeah, going on in with the engage like you see in this clip with the Cataclysm and just acting as the full engaged. And luckily, the rest of the team is also able to clean up here. So there has been times where maybe he gets a little bit too too aggressive, and it heavily relies on the rest of his team following on through. So I'm interested to see what he plans to bring out here in now their loser bracket semi/final if they are able to make it up against TALON. And that's always been kind of the key component here for HK, is he's always been the go button for the team in the mid-section of the game.
That's true. And if you consider the fact that HK also managed to evolve as a team where they can also play the early game in a way that they can match these proactive teams, which means, Hollow will be that steady pillar when it comes to the early.
Now let's take a look over toward 3Z, and it was not for the majority of this split, unfortunately, for 3Z. He may have been the only retained player from the HK roster, but it felt like he was kind of playing in his former shadow, as we hadn't really seen him pop off a whole lot. You can take a look at these stats, sitting around the 8th, 7th overall when it comes to, CS numbers during your lane phase, but then recently, especially in the most recent playoff matchup, we finally got to see him on carries like the Akali, like the Gangplank a little bit more often. We always wondered, where was this man the entire split for HKA?
And it's such a refreshing sight to see. You're right. It's where has this man been, considering that his role when it comes to this team in general has been sort of relegated to more utility, more on the tanks, a top side to supplement the team fights. But again, with his Akali pick, which means they're confident enough to get early ahead and not allow the opposition to, stop them from growing.
Yeah, exactly. He's been able to find some good flanks and turn around heavy team fights that usually weren't in the favor of HK, and knowing his strengths, knowing when the CC is down, and not being afraid to jump into the middle of the action.
Yeah, that's true. Usually we have the enemy players looking at 3Z as the main engage of some sort with all the CC, but now in this clip in particular, in the Akali, I am looking forward to more possibly carry picks at top side for this man.
Now let's go ahead and take a look on over to AHQ, and you may see 10 members on this roster, but the main 5 you're going to be looking at is, of course, Civ, Kongyu, Unuboy, Wako, as well as Ysera, as they have been the mainstays when it comes to their starting positions.
Yep, AHQ. This is the organization that has been home to players and rosters that do amazingly well during group stages. And in terms of titles, their last championship title was around 2016 regional finals. But for their PCS run, they've got a 7-win streak that actually got stalled rather by TALON.
And that's the thing about AHQ. We have Uniboy, who's been able to actually excel himself during the group stage, round robin of the regular season. But similar to kind of the story like you mentioned when it comes to AHQ's championships, they've always just fallen a little bit short. And especially during the playoffs here, that's something we have seen from him just a little bit, where if he starts to falter, a lot of the team heavily relies on him and Kongyu to help carry the rest of the match.
Yeah, and I think that is the inconsistent factor, I suppose, when we see them during the playoffs, as AHQ has unfortunately dropped to the lower bracket. But yeah, Uniboy's starting performance has been stellar, even garnering around a 32 KDA when they acquired their win streak. And he has been falling to this Zoe pick when it's open, especially when he is confident enough to get those early picks.
Yeah, like you mentioned, his KDA around 32 at some point was actually one of the highest in the world for 2 weeks there. And I think when paired up alongside Kongyu, of course, we talked about it a lot during every match we see of AHQ, is this pairing from Mad Team has often just been that mid-game, early-game catalyst for the rest of the squad.
Yeah, true. Considering that this duo has been together since ECS 2017, and this particular duo has won multiple top 3 finish in the LMS. So with that said, this duo in particular, and for Uniboy coming into this finals weekend is going to be really, really scary.
Well, let's go on over to Civ, which often pitted into losing matchups by way of the draft. Civ still has been able to find his opportunities into the mid to late game of a lot of matches for AHQ, with getting insane flanks off and just becoming a menace during team fights and disrupting their opponents.
Yeah, Ziv, I believe, is literally the longest member in AHQ. He's been around since 2014. And I think what I like about this player is that he can be assigned to different types of roles depending on what the team needs. So either he becomes that Renekton to buffer from early to mid at least and allow the rest of the lanes to carry for the late game, or be that bruiser, which, TALON, or rather AHQ, really needs.
Yeah, because you're often relying, like we mentioned, on Kanye and Uniboy to be more of the major threat, so he can often fall back onto picks like the set. We've also seen him now on the Ornn a couple more times where he actually loses out a lot during the lane phase, but still is able to find opportunities in this 1v2 up here and helping pick up kills against their opponents.
Yeah, he's able to at least make the lane either even, or if it's not in, if the matchup is not in his favor, not bleed out too much. So this balance is actually pretty perfect for HQ because again, is able to save these teammates, his teammates rather, from certain death.
Let's go ahead and take a look on over to Waco, which for many have been dubbed the best here in the PCS, but don't take him for granted. His lane skills match up as well, as he has been often able to come ahead out of lane, as you can tell by that gold difference at 15, alongside the help of Kongyu, who's often focusing a lot of his attention toward the bot side of AHQ.
Yep, Wacko definitely a scary laner when it comes to the bottom side of HQ. And yeah, this guy has been around 2017 in this team in particular, and I actually has yet to win his own championship title. But that's the reason why I'm so hyped for this, because during his PCS group stage run, he has been performing really solid, really, really well as, that fallback when it comes to the team fights for later.
Yeah, often relying on to his misfortune, has had really good positioning in a majority of AHQ's games, has been rarely kind of the person to get caught out in the late game and costing any games over toward AHQ, especially in some of their series up against TALON, where you can see his confidence shows not being afraid to step this far forward on the Aphelios.
And I think it also has something to do with the trust with Isera sometimes, especially when paired either on a Tom Kench. But at this time around on this Aphelios, for sure, wouldn't want to give that away. But when it comes to maybe counter picks against scary laners, Wacko can also pick up the mage bot laners if it's needed.
Yeah, mage bot laners, and also is pretty confident in himself when Yasura is even roaming around the map. You can take a look back toward this clip against Alpha, where he was almost able to take down this 2v1, actually forcing out Outland to have to give up his summoners, and unfortunately, the support falls on down, so you can't catch him out, even in these 2v1s, especially in lane.
Yeah, and considering that was Isera not with the carry, and now with this clip in particular, they're not able to finish off Wacko, and his positioning has been very vital during team fights for HQ.
Well, that's pretty much it for AHQ. We're going to go ahead, though, and switch our attention on over to TALON Esports, which this is kind of the team that came together of multiple key parts from past rosters in 2019. TALON was able to find immediate success in the PCS early, but we started to see them falter a little bit when it came to the mid-season, but now they've been able to force pretty much every series the entire length, only recently just dropping down into the lower bracket after being taken out by MACHT.
Yeah, TALON is one of the crowd favorites as well coming into the PCS in general. And considering that they've ended 2 win streaks, which is against MACHT, which is also against HQ. And of course, they got awesome key players that made that possible.
And speaking of players, let's take a look toward Unified, who's been the PCS multi-kill leader, has himself the one Penta out of the regular season, as well as quadras and triples. The guy is often the late game threat for TALON, and they always have him as that late game checkmark when it comes to the game plan.
Yeah, quite similar to what Wacko also favors. He does play a lot of the Misfortune, but his secondary favorite pick is also the Kalista, which is actually not very surprising considering a lot of the teams would immediately ban out the Kalista when they're up against TALON.
Yeah, and you pair him alongside, of course, the likes of Kaiwing 2 with the bot lane as a pairing with that Rakan that we've seen time and time again pop up during the playoffs here that have resulted in TALON taking a lot of these late games, especially at Game 5 up against AHQ.
Yeah, you really have to draft or try to play against Unified here. He's just really hard to catch, especially that they're also the only team that actually drafts the Lovers duo right now from the remaining 4 teams that we had.
So with the bot lane intact here for TALON, they've often been able to find themselves to come out very strong. Like you mentioned, the Kalista pick often being banned out here against the squad, and if he's not taken down immediately into these team fights, we've often resulted in their opponents, crying a little bit. Because if you're not able to take down Unified or focus your attention, focus your resources onto his carry, it will come back and bite you. And let's go ahead and take a look over toward Hanabi, which early on in the split found himself on the tank fill role when it came to Talon's game plans, but recently has become a bit of a secondary threat in the form of just a heavy engage player on the form of the Ornn or the Maokai, but not afraid to bring out the pocket pick carries like the Gangplank or the Vladimir.
Yeah, I think what I like about Hanabi is that, River doesn't have to worry too much at topside since he can really manage on his own. So it allows River to focus on the rest of the lanes. And just as you mentioned, he can either be on engage duty or soak up all the damage duty, but he also has these pocket picks. You would see sometimes he would be on the Kennen, even the scary Vladimir, or maybe even sometimes the Quinn.
Yeah, and that's been a bit of a scary one too, because like Hanabi early on in the split, you could take a look at all the side content produced by Talon, and he's pretty humble himself. He doesn't see himself to be one of the top laners when it comes to the PCS. Maybe he's just being, like I mentioned, humble and he doesn't want to brag a little bit, but he's been able to perform quite well when it comes to the playoffs.
Yeah, and considering this clip as well, managed to keep 3 members of MACHT busy as they try to just run for the hills. And this again gives space to the other carries of Talon, which is really, really apparent when we see, Talon perform.
And next we go ahead and take a look over toward River, which coming into the spring split found himself to be the biggest question mark when it came to Talon's roster. His LGL performance was considered average, even being on the second-ranked team of V3 at the time, and his previous performances in the LMS were nothing too impressive. But immediately he established himself to be one of the main checkmarks when it came to the early to mid-game plans of Talon, often snowballing his mid lane or bot lane ahead.
Yeah, and sometimes he can actually play carry himself, especially when he picks up either the Rek'Sai. We've seen him sort of stomp with the Jarvan for a pick when we saw the Nova series as well. So he can get really scary if left alone.
Yeah, if he's given the opportunities to jump onto your backline, he won't be afraid to do it. And for me, too, I want to see him, especially coming into this Grand Finals weekend, if we could see a little bit more of the Rek'Sai, because that was such a clutch pickup for him during the regular season. I do like, though, that he has been able to fall back onto champions like this Jarvan, even picking up quadra kills.
Yeah, I guess what's interesting is that he's never picked up the Olaf despite having such a wide range of pool, considering he actually picked up, the Karthus way back in as well as the Kindred. So perhaps there's still a lot more that we haven't seen coming from River, despite, having to fall back on this Jarvan and as well as Rek'Sai, which is understandable since it has proved successful for Talon.
But we've also seen with Talon that if he's not able to make an early impact, like something on this Elise especially, where if he kind of just sits still and he doesn't gank for the first 15 minutes, the team's fate usually isn't a good fortune.
Yeah, it is quite the weakness that the enemy teams could possibly take advantage of, as it is that tempo that Talon really relies on to get ahead. And just as you mentioned, try to allow the lanes to snowball either on mid or maybe even at bot.
So now we'll go ahead and take a look toward our current, you could say, #1 when it comes to the PCS regular season, and currently already locked into our grand finals. It's MACHT Esports, and this roster as a whole was very close to not existing at the start of the PCS when we had the disbandment of G-Rex, and there was a lot of questions up in the air when it came to this roster's fate. Luckily, MACHT Esports came together and kept this roster as one, and it's paid off here as they are currently at one point went almost undefeated for 15 to 16 games back-to-back.
Yeah, and it was, again, Talon that knocked them out of that win streak game-wise, but series-wise, they've still managed to, stay on top.
Now let's go ahead and take a look toward the top lane, and that's going to be PK, which him himself has been rather consistent, always able to, pick up his Aatrox and be able to find himself advantages in the lane, and it's kind of similar to what we see a lot of the other top laners in the league, that if they're not going to carry immediately through the lane or stop the lane, they're just very consistent when it comes to team fights.
Yeah, agreed. And at that point, it's just managing to keep that top side safe, which PK really does well. And considering, again, he can switch it up either that, engage or additional damage to supplement the team fights.
Now to the mid lane, we take a look toward Mission, which has been pretty much the commander when it comes to the matchups as well as the team fights for MACHT. As you see, has 10 games on the Azir and is an absolute menace in the late game, but also now starting to show his pocket pick of that Corki, considering it's now started to become a bit more meta in the most recent patches.
Yeah, it feels like you have to really invest a lot of resources, maybe even get your support to roam to finally try and shut him down when it comes to the laning phase. Because if he survives the laning phase scotch-free, he's going to be very, very scary and just such a huge threat, especially at objective fights.
Yeah, you can see here a couple clips on why you don't let a Corki just freely farm in lane, as MACHT have been able to punish that numerous times against their opponents. But like I mentioned as well, his Azir, his late game team fights can be absolutely deadly on top of everything else. And you can just see here, he's just not touched during any of these fights, and if you let him just rock all over your team like this, he's going to be picking up triples and, quadras nonstop.
Yeah, and it's just, I think this is one of the clips on where he's just also hungry for kills at this point, and it's just one of those things where when left unchecked, he's just going to just ruin your day. And as you can see, as you mentioned on this Azir pick as well, makes it even more even harder to actually catch him off guard.
Yeah, because there's been many team fights where he has been, the go button when it comes to MACHT's plans, but you even see a couple times where if his positioning isn't perfect, especially on something like the Corki, he can be caught out, and that was the main reason that TALON was able to take that game in the best of 5 series against them. Let's go ahead, though, and shift over toward the jungle, and it's going to be Gemini, which him himself, I thought during the regular season, the round robin, he did his job good, but now into the playoffs, he's been actually able to accelerate a lot of his play style and really picked up the pace from MACHT, where they're ending a lot of these games before 30 minutes.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when we saw him first at the first few round robins where they acquired their first losses, we see Gemini getting caught out during the early phases of the game. But now he has shifted onto this Jarvan and as well as sometimes the Sejuani, as he's been switching either tank duty between PK and as well as with PK rather.
Yeah, not afraid to jump in deep into the enemy backline on, say, a Rek'Sai as well. So for opposing teams, they got to watch out for him. The one weakness, I would say, has been his objective securing. He had that stint during the regular season where, he left back, a couple smites that he probably should have taken in his favor, and it has costed MACHT some game time, but usually they're still able to close out even around some mistakes like that.
Yeah, and I think that sort of weakness that perhaps Gemini can possibly do again is going to be extremely vital, considering, again, we're only down to our 4 teams, and it is the finals weekend we're talking about.
And with that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and have to call it quits for our preview show. But of course, if you guys want to tune in to any of the action of the PCS, you can do so by simply following the pages either on Twitch, YouTube, or Facebook, or if you're joining us over on television, be sure to check your local TV providers as well as our partnered broadcasters, where you guys can check out all the action when it comes to the PCS. From myself and Riku, we look forward to seeing you guys this weekend for our grand finals and to see who's going to be taking home the first championship of the PCS.